The parable of the Good Samaritan is probably the story of Jesus that has most deeply embedded itself into the consciousness of our culture. Most people know something of the parable of the Good Samaritan, and even if they don't know the story, they know what a Good Samaritan is. A Good Samaritan is someone who stops what they're doing to help someone in need, a stranger in need or a stranger in crisis. We even have in our country, in our municipalities, Good Samaritan laws that are there to protect people that stop and help others. Which means that most of us have a general idea of what the parable is about. Jesus is telling us that everyone is our neighbor and that our responsibility as good human beings is to stop and help people in need. It is a morality tale designed to sort of tell us to do better. Do better. When you see someone in need, do better. Except, I don't think that's what the story is about. And I don't think Jesus normally is in the business of telling us to do better. Jesus doesn't really tell morality tales. Jesus doesn't tell us like stories of this is how we should be and then like say, do better at being that, because Jesus isn't interested in us trying to do better. Jesus is interested in us being different, completely changing the way we think about things and live in our world. And if you see a story of Jesus and you think it's just about doing better, like in the consciousness that we have right now, doing better, you might not be getting the gist of the story. What Jesus is really trying to do isn't to get us to do better, but rather to completely change the way we live and see the world. Jesus is trying to update us from humanity 1.0 to humanity 2.0, to change, to radically change the way we think. And parables are specifically designed to sort of be a little troubling, a little hard to understand. And it's the kind of thing that you have to mull over it and mull over it and mull over it, because it's trying to rewire part of your brain. So what I'd like to do is just sort of enter the world of this encounter that Jesus has with this scribe, to maybe move you out of the way you've been hearing the story and invite you into puzzling over a new way of hearing. Jesus is heading toward Jerusalem. He's getting close to Jerusalem, and our scripture interprets it as a lawyer. This isn't like a lawyer like we have lawyers. This is a scribe, someone who's versed in the Torah, someone who is versed in the Jewish law. And presumably this scribe is sort of based in Jerusalem. He's heard of this upstart rabbi who's becoming, an influencer out there, who's heading toward Jerusalem. So he confronts this Jesus to sort of test his mettle. Like, who is this rabbi that's, we're hearing all about? And he asks Jesus, and we're told by the narrator, we're told by Luke, that he is there to test Jesus. So he's not a sincere questioner. He's there to sort of test Jesus' mettle. And he says, Rabbi, teacher, what is the most, important law in the scripture? Of the 613. And what Jesus does is turns, like a good teacher, turns the question back onto the lawyer and says, not only what is written, but what do you read there? What do you think as you read what's written in the scriptures? What do you think? And he answers by quoting two passages from two different sections of the Torah. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus goes, right on, good answer, Let's move on. Now the lawyer asks a worthwhile question to continue this challenging of Jesus. Who specifically is my neighbor? Like if the law says love God and love your neighbor, now it's helpful if I know who my neighbor is, because I need to know who I'm supposed to love and who I get to not love, because that's important to know. And it's not an unreasonable question. The passage that the lawyer is citing is from Leviticus, and it says this: "You shall not take vengeance or bear any grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself." You shall not take vengeance or bear any grudge on the sons of your own people. You should love your neighbor as yourself. Now those two clauses to go together and imply that neighbor are the sons of your own people. So I'm wondering, are the sons of my own people just the people in my tribe, or my village, or my clan, or my village, or my tribe, or my country? How do we define sons of my own people? Who am I supposed to love, and who do I get to not love, and who do I get to take vengeance on? It's not an unreasonable question, and I'm sure that rabbis and scribes and Pharisees and priests had been debating that question for a very long time. So he asks Jesus, who specifically is my neighbor? Who do I have to love, and who do I get to hate? Now, the answer that we know Jesus has on his lips, when the lawyer says, who is my neighbor, the answer that our Jesus has on his lips is everybody. Everybody is your neighbor. And he could have said that, and he could have left it at that, but he didn't say that. He said something else. He replied by telling a story. He replied by telling a story that we think means everyone is your neighbor, and that you need to love everyone, even the stranger, even the foreigner. Now the thing, here's the key interpretive detail, is that Jews and Samaritans hated each other. Hated each other. And it was a hatred that has been active, been boiling for 1,000 years. It was a hatred that began right after the reign of King Solomon. King David united the 12 tribes of Israel. King Solomon, his son, continued that. And then after Solomon died, the tribes split apart. 10 tribes in the north had a capital in Samaria. 2 tribes in the south had a capital in Jerusalem. And they became 2 different countries. And they hated each other. Only like the hatred that siblings could have. Because they were close enough, and they just hated each other. This deep-seated, absolute hatred. Nothing good can come out of Samaria. They're horrible, etc. Okay, so that's important to know. Now, with that in mind, part of how we hear this story, what we think the story is about, is that everyone is our neighbor, even Samaritans, even the horrible Samaritan. And if we're we should stop. And then Jesus tells this parable of like over-the-top helping. It's not just stopping to loan someone your cell phone so they can call AAA. It's not even just changing their tire for them, but it's changing their tire for them and then escorting them to the tire shop and getting it all fixed, and then buying them dinner and putting them up in the hotel because it was inconvenient for them to get a flat tire. It's Jesus tells this over-the-top story of helping with a foreigner involved, and we think like it's a morality tale that even the Samaritan we should stop and help as much as we can. Do better at helping the stranger, even the stranger that's like of a group you hate. And if that's what Jesus wanted to say, he should have told a different story. The story that Jesus should have said was there was a Samaritan walking down the road, and the Samaritan was beaten and left for dead, and a priest came by and said, "Oh, a Samaritan." And then a Levite came by and said, "Oh, a Samaritan." But then, a regular Jew was coming by, or a scribe was coming by, or a lawyer was coming by and said, "Ooh, a Samaritan, ooh, that's yicky, but he needs help," and helps the person. Go and do likewise. But that's not the story Jesus tells. There is this, Jesus tweaks the expected story in a way that couldn't help but get under the skin of the people that he was telling the story to. A man was going down the road. Now, if I'm telling a story, like a person's going down the road in a particular cultural context, the image in your brain is that it's one of us. A person's going down the road. You're thinking it's an American person going down the road because, right, it's our culture. Okay, that's the picture. Like there's a man going down the road, beaten, left for dead. A priest comes by, passes by on the other side. A Levite comes by, Levite comes by. So people that have high status that you think should help, but they're too busy like all of us, so they just move on because they have to get on with their busy work. And then it's a Samaritan that comes by. The hated Samaritan that comes by. And the Samaritan helps the person, but not only helps the person, but goes like to the nth degree in helping the person. Is just magnanimous beyond help. Now, this is kind of hard to explain. But the the lawyer, was asking the question, who's my neighbor? Who should I help? Out of my grandness and graciousness and magnanimity, out of that, who out there should I help? And there's sort of a power dynamic in that, right? If you're driving your car and you're thinking, should I help the person who's washing my windshield and asking for money, or should I just look ahead and pretend I'm not seeing that, or the person by the side of the road, or the person in need, or the immigrant, or the whatever, right? There's a power dynamic that I'm in this position of power, I'm in this position of awesomeness, and I'm trying to figure out who I'm going to help. And Jesus is telling the story where not the model of the story, the person in the power, the person who's being gracious and magnanimous, is the hated Samaritan. And the person needing the help maybe is the lawyer or the Jew. It totally flips the dynamic. It's not about who should I help out of my graciousness and who do I get to ignore, but it's imagine a world in which the person you're hating is actually the one you need to save you. Think about that in terms of the Samaritan being the homeless person, that you're trying to debate whether or not to help. When in reality, we're created to be so interdependent that that person might be the person that saves your life. or the immigrant, or the undocumented immigrant, or the white supremacist, or the Antifa protester, or, all of this stuff. Jesus is trying to break down the way that we other, like the other, should I help the other or not? Who is my neighbor that I should help? And Jesus is saying, if only you could be that good of a neighbor. If only you could be as good as the homeless person. If only you could be as good as the Samaritan. The Samaritan is not someone that you should deign to help someday. The Samaritan, if only. And Jesus isn't saying that the Samaritan is better than the Jew. Jesus is saying, stop thinking the way you're thinking. Even asking the question, should I deign to help this person? You're starting on the wrong foot. Realize that we are created to be interdependent with one another. Not just should I deign to help, but we're knitted so closely in a relationship that we're dependent on one another. And even the beginning of that thinking, is this person worthy of my help, is starting off on the wrong foot, heading in the wrong direction. Jesus isn't trying to get us to just do a little bit better at helping the person we deign to help. Jesus is trying to get us to completely change those concepts of treating other people as objects by saying, well, what if you're the object and they're the subject? You can see how dealing in subjects and objects, it breaks down. And it's hard to grasp. And that's how parables work. It's like a story we expect. Jesus flips one detail, and then we're like, oh, that's weird. In what way is that trying to get me to change my assumptions in what I was expecting this story to be about? And right now, I think, is a particular time when we need to allow this story to trouble us. Because right now, in our cultural conversation, we are being pushed by all of the political and media forces to look at other groups as objects and to diminish their value. And this story, this parable of the good white supremacist, this parable of the good Antifa protester, this parable of the good radical Muslim terrorist, is trying to get us to challenge our assumptions in the way that we label people, the way even by our language we create division and divisiveness. And you can see how we have tamed the parable of the Good Samaritan. Because we think a Good Samaritan, right, means be a good human. But to talk about the parable of the good radical Muslim terrorist, that's a different thing. Coming from the lips of Jesus, it's a different thing. It's trying to get us to change the way we look at other beloved creatures of God and redefine our relationship.